pop themselves on mute, that would be fantastic.
Oh, sorry. No. How?
Or you, Karen, can you mute everybody?
Yeah, I'll mute.
Okay.
No. Oh, she's muted. Okay. Everyone muting?
No.
No. Let me mute someone.
Going to participants. You all.
I'm just muting people. Why is she not muting? Okay. I think we're all right. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming along this evening. This is Christine Chalklin, and Christine is an astrologer. She also does mythic cards. Is that right, Christine? Mythic tarot cards?
Tarot, yeah.
Yeah, and back flower remedies. And she also teaches for the Mayo Astrology School. She also teaches all of the things that she practices and does that for small groups and privately as well. So tonight, Christine is going to talk about astrology. So I'm going to hand over to Christine, and thank you very much. Questions a little bit later. If you can all stay muted until Christine stops for questions, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Thank you for inviting me to come along and speak. It's lovely. I'm actually up in Yorkshire near Leeds. So obviously these days distance is no object because we're just connected immediately. I used to live down in Surrey in Camberley, so I have quite a lot of friends and clients down in that area. Astrology for me goes right back to my childhood. My mother did astrology, and her mother was very interested in astrology and was also psychic. So when I was growing up, there were often funny pieces of paper with all sorts of funny symbols on them, and they were astrology charts, obviously all hand drawn in those days, so we didn't have computers. And I was just always fascinating that my mother could look at a piece of paper just by having somebody's birth details and find out quite a bit about them and talk about their personality and various things. And I just thought that is such an amazing thing. And I felt, you know, even when I was younger, that that was something that I would want to do later in life. I was always interested as I carried on, and I lived in Germany for a long time. I had my children there, but when I came back to England in 1992, I decided that was the time to start studying astrology, and I signed up with the Faculty of Astrological Studies in London and did my exams with them, did some private tutoring as well with an astrologer in Surrey. And then I started to see clients, but I always felt still there was something missing a bit. I wanted to help people, but then also include something else. So I then studied in Wallingford in Oxfordshire with the Bach Flower Foundation. I don't know if many of you probably have heard of that. You've probably all heard of Rescue Remedy, but I did the course with them and trained as a practitioner. And I felt that astrology and flower essences just went together beautifully. And in fact, if you find out about Dr. Bach, he was very into astrology, and he looked at the moon signs of each individual when he was looking at which different essence or which different remedy to give, and then obviously what was going on in their life. So I felt that was really important. My astrology teacher was also worked with the Mythic Tarot, which is a tarot set. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of different tarot packs, were then, and probably even more now. But I loved the way that it combined mythology, astrology, and the tarot. So I felt that was the pack for me. I still use that pack when I'm working with people and helping them just look at, I mean, I'm sure lots of you have seen tarot, and it's not really always about what's going to happen in your life, although lots of people would like to know that, but it's very much, what do those symbols mean, those ancient symbols that we don't understand, the pictures, and what do they bring up in our subconscious, which has always fascinated me. So then, having those three modalities, I then got very much into life coaching. I trained as a life coach in London and worked with a company that had group coaching, and I found that that was a really nice way to work with groups of people, and it was also more affordable for people. So that's for me really the four kind of things that I work with all the time. I don't always work with all of those things with each client. Some people only want one thing, some people want everything. Some people only want flower essences and don't really want astrology, which is fine. You know, it can all be done in that way. So that's for me how astrology came into my life. But I mean, astrology's been around forever. It's a very ancient wisdom. We know that it goes back to ancients in caves making little symbols on the walls according to the moon cycles, and as it progressed, in every civilization has its own astrology, which is fascinating to think at those times. You know, they were looking at different correlations, different cycles, different planetary cycles. And I think we mainly know about Egyptian astrology. Babylon was also a real kind of hotspot of astrology. And then the Greek astrology, which is kind of what our system, the Western astrology is based on now. The Mayans had astrology, the Chinese. So, you know, all of these different cultures had their own way of using astrology. And of course, it's just been around for thousands of years. People use it for different things. I think for me, the main thing, also with all the other things I do, is very much about self-awareness. I really feel that your birth chart is really the window to your soul. It's, you know, we get the chart by the date, the time, and the place of your birth. People often ask me, do we need an accurate birth time? Obviously, the more accurate it is, the better. The more the chart will be accurate. But lots of people don't have a birth time, and you can still work with midday or tea time or breakfast time or whatever time you might have. There's still enough information there to find out quite a lot. And I think for me, it's being able to tune into your chart, understand where all the different planets were when you were born, and how they relate to each other. And we all know where the sun was when we were born, because that's our star sign, our birth sign, whatever we want to call it. But there's so much more. And later on, Karen's kindly given me permission to talk a bit about her birth charts, which I'll put up in a minute later on, just to show that although Karen is a Virgo, like lots of other people, each person has an individual where the other planets are, you know, where the moon is, where the rising sign is, and so on, and all the other planets. So probably lots of you have had a chart done and you know a little bit about that. But it is very much, you know, what can you do with it? You can understand yourself. And one of the big things with astrology is it's great for timing. You know, you can time events in your life. We all know that life is all about cycles and the moon cycles that we know about, but there are lots of other planetary cycles that we can tune into. And by understanding these cycles, we can really get a lot more out of life, know what kind of year we're in. Is it a year to be expanding, or is it a year to be being a bit quiet? Oh, have we got challenges coming up? But, you know, we can kind of track these things. Obviously, we don't always know the outcome, but we can kind of track what's going on, and see where we are and how we can best face what's coming, really, you know, and rather than being fearful and worried, kind of asking, well, what's it going to teach us? What can we do with that information? Which I find, you know, is the really most important thing there. So what else can we do with astrology? Obviously, I use it with health, and people go a lot further for health, for well-being. I have several colleagues who are medical astrologers who actually really do use astrology in depth for healing. There's herbal astrology, goes way back to the ancients, and even probably a lot more herbalists these days use the culpepper herbal, and he kind of assigned each herb and flower and tree to a particular planet. So, you know, that can be really interesting as well. Astrology is used in counseling a lot. It's used in psychotherapy. A lot of Jungian psychotherapists use astrology. You know, with Jung himself was an astrologer. He did a lot of work with astrology, and he developed, looking at the 4 elements, which I'll talk a bit about later, the 4 elements in nature, the 4 elements in astrology, the fire, the air, the earth, and the water. And he developed a way of using that to help people understand themselves. And that has been taken to these times, that people use the Myers-Briggs system, which you may have heard of. It's used in business. And people are often very surprised when I say, you know, that's come from astrology, because they don't know that, but it has come from there. And, you know, the archetypes is that's where it's actually being used. It's probably been tweaked a bit, and there are all sorts of different types now, but the basic understanding of that was there. I've used astrology for business. I've worked with businesses who want to know when is a really good time to launch a new business, to launch a new product, to look at their business if it's maybe not working, something wrong, is the name wrong. And often if we look at the chart of when the business was launched, it's not a date that I would have chosen. So often I've worked with relaunching and doing something different and picking a really good auspicious day for doing things. The Chinese are obviously very good at this. They don't do anything without casting a chart. They don't build anything, they don't start anything, they don't, relationships, weddings, marriages, births, it's all based on Feng Shui and astrology. So they're no stranger to that. Here in the West, we're a little bit, particularly in England, I find people are a bit, you know, we know that, but it's, oh, it's just in the newspaper, it's Mystic Meg, it's crystal balls. But, you know, I think most of us here know that it's not like that at all. And you know, I've worked also with companies using astrology for team building, working, you know, when people work in a team, and do they get on, do they not get on, what's actually going on there. And you can use astrology going back to those elements that I mentioned, you know, the fiery characters, the earthy characters, the practical ones, the water characters who are probably more emotional, and the air people who very much are logical and in their minds. And so you'd look at the combination there to see, have you got a good combination? Do you need more balance? You know, what's kind of going on in that direction? And that can be really very, very helpful. Certainly for a team leader or a boss to understand their team and to see where they're coming from, and what's going on, or how he or she can help them. Astrology can be used in sports. In fact, my partner Alan is a football fan and an astrologer, and he's written several books about combining astrology with sports and football in particular. And it's just amazing if you look at the teams and the way they're set up, and how that could be improved. Unfortunately, he's not had very much luck in this country with using that, because there's a big problem with astrology, but it has been used in other countries, and I think in Germany, and he worked with teams in Iceland, and so there has been some interest, and we can only hope that that will go further. And you know, it just, to me or anyone who knows astrology, would just look and think, well, it's so obvious. Why, you know, why is all this anti? You know, it's a bit of a shame. Astrology can also be used in gambling, which is quite fascinating. I know several astrology colleagues who use it for horse racing, for betting. It's not something that I do necessarily, but it's interesting that it can be used in that way. Gardening, agriculture, astrology has been used forever for growing crops. We know planting by the moon, the seed time, the growth time, everything is cycles in life. So we know that you know, that would work. And Rudolf Steiner had worked a lot with biodynamic farming, using the cycles of the moon, and that's become very, very popular again now, over the last kind of decades. And a lot of wine growers use it, and particularly in South America, also in France and other countries, probably not in England, unfortunately, although you never know. But they've had a lot of success with that. And I remember talking to some wine growers once, saying the wine is just amazing. We don't know why, it doesn't make any sense, you know, moon signs and moon positions, you know, it's very unscientific, but it works, and the wine just has something about it. So I think we can kind of understand that that would work, and it would be, you know, really nice to have something that's grown in that way with nature. And of course, farming was always done in that way before, and unfortunately now everything's, you know, done in this kind of mechanical way, and pesticides and all of that. But I think a lot of people are going back to that kind of natural way, which is good. So it's important to know the cycles of the planets and what's going on. And I'm particularly going to talk about the planet Jupiter and the planet Saturn, which probably most of you have heard about because it's in all the papers and magazines at the moment, that we've got the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction next Monday. And it's a big deal, and not for 800 years, 600 years, 500 years. There's all sorts of things buzzing around that it hasn't been seen since then. So we'll have a little look at that in a minute. So the planetary cycles are just cycling around their phases all the time. And we know the sun takes a year to go right round, because that's our sun sign. The moon goes around a lot quicker, and we see the phases of the moon in 28, 29 days. And all the other planets have their own cycle: Mercury, Venus, Mars, and then we get to the outer planets, Saturn and Jupiter, that I just mentioned. And then even further out to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So from the sun going around in a year, the cycle, to Pluto, which is a cycle of 248 years. So that's a huge difference, and these are massive cycles. There is also a big Pluto cycle going on at the moment, which is, you know, bringing a cycle to an end. Jupiter takes a year in each sign, so it takes 12 years to go right round the whole zodiac. So we have roughly a year in each sign. So every 12 years it comes back to the same position. And Saturn takes 28 years, between 28, 29 years to go right round the zodiac. And that's known in astrology as the Saturn Return, and it's often a dreaded time, because Saturn in astrology and mythology is old father time, is associated with limitation, responsibility, all the things that we probably don't like so much. And so when Saturn returns, when people are around 28, around that age, it's often a time of responsibility. And usually people say, oh yes, that's when I got married, that's when I had my first child, that's when I bought a house. It's usually a time of connecting to more responsible times, you know, that you've kind of grown up and life gets serious. And in astrology, Saturn is the lord of karma, so it's also about understanding who you are and your soul and your soul's journey and where you're going. So this conjunction is coming up. I don't know if anybody's seen, we've had such dull grey weather. I don't know if you've been seeing the planets getting closer and closer, but on Monday at around sunset for an hour, we will actually see them as, and they will look from where we are as one. And people are saying this is the Christmas star, and that's what in the Bible it was Jupiter, Saturn plus Venus probably that made that bright star that was prophesied that Jesus was going to be born. And it probably will look a bit like that. And you know, I think we're going to have to go out and have a look and see if we can see something, but it depends if the skies are clear, and it's only going to be visible for 1 hour, so it's not a lot of time to do that. But astrologically, the most exciting thing is that Jupiter and Saturn's been in Capricorn for the last couple of years, and Jupiter's been in Capricorn for a year, and Pluto is also there. So that those three planets have been together all through this year. And I remember at the January, the beginning of this year, the end of last year, we looked at the chart for this year, and astrologers have looked at this combination for years. And we just thought, what is this going to be? You know, this is such an unusual conjunction of three planets together in Capricorn. And sometimes some of the conferences that we went to, some of the astrologers gave terrible doom and gloom predictions, and almost the end of the world was coming this year. And we thought, oh, you know, what are they talking about? But actually, you know, when you think what's actually happened, they weren't too far off. You know, wars, they talked about a war. Well, it's not a war as we knew it. It's been a war on the virus, hasn't it? And whatever else that's brought. But I think whatever, you know, these planets in Capricorn represents the establishment, the government, politics, the banks, the church, all the established orders. So seeing these planets going through there and being so close together, whatever, I think all astrologers knew there would be massive change on a scale that we probably haven't ever seen before, which of course has happened. Yeah, so we know this year has been, you know, on all levels, it's been a time of well, Saturn restriction, discipline, being told we can't go out, and Jupiter expanding all of that. But now I think as they move into Aquarius, I think we can kind of see that in a different way. Although it is interesting that Saturn moved into Aquarius today, literally this morning, for the second time. It did move in March, and then it kind of retrograded back. And it was interesting that Saturn arrived in Aquarius on the 24th of March, which I believe was either the day after the lockdown, probably, I think. And we just thought that is absolute astrology. Saturn restriction, control, and Aquarius is freedom. So we had those two clashes together on that day. And now Saturn's gone back in, and Jupiter's arriving on Sunday into Aquarius. And so we've got more restrictions, more lockdowns, and more of the same, really. And yeah, how's that going to pan out? We'll see. But as I said, I think Aquarius does give a lot more hope. It's a lot lighter. Jupiter's a lot happier in Aquarius than it is in Capricorn. And I think people can really feel now that there might be some hope. We can, look at freedom in another way, and want that freedom. And of course, Saturn continuing in Aquarius. Saturn in ancient astrology was the ruler of Aquarius, so it's very strong in that sign. And yeah, people say, well, what's going to happen? How's it going to turn out? We don't really know. It could go either way. I mean, I think there's going to be a huge fight for more freedom and a huge fight for more controls. So it's going to be this, and what will come out of that, we don't know for sure. I think whatever happens, we need new solutions. We need really, the Aquarian ideal is freedom, liberation, equality, and all of those things I think will be really big now over the next years, become even bigger. And we need to elevate global consciousness to a completely different level so that we can bring in those Aquarian principles. And human rights, I think, will be a big issue, even more so. Well, they are, aren't they? Because we feel that they've been eroded this year for most of us. It's all about collaboration as well, Aquarius. And I think that's, for me, the silver lining this year, that although we were all shut down from all our groups and meetings, we've all emerged on Zoom. And actually, that has been a total silver lining, because here we are with people from all over the place. I mean, I'm involved in several groups up here in Yorkshire, and this year, from our groups of 10, 12, maybe sometimes 15 people from the area who used to come and meet in a cafe, we've now got people from Thailand, from France, from Glastonbury, from Cornwall, all over the place joining us, which is marvelous. And to me, that's this Aquarian principle of collaboration and working in a different way and spreading the message, which I think is really important that we always do that. Aquarius is also, we've all heard of the Age of Aquarius. There was a song, I believe, in the 60s. And it's an interesting thing, because astrologers have never decided exactly when the Age of Aquarius started. Some say it hasn't started, some say it started in the 60s because there are a lot of planets in Aquarius, and some feel it's really starting now. But these ages are quite literally ages. I mean, they span over like 2,000 years, and we're moving from the age of Pisces into Aquarius. And we don't know, we can't say, oh right, it's that year. It's such a big overlap. But I believe it has started and things have changed, and probably the age of technology brought in that Aquarian age, because Aquarius is very much, through the planet Uranus, is very much responsible for technology, computers, and the next step, of course, is artificial intelligence, which is also coming our way. So I think there will be a dominance of more science, more technology. Artificial intelligence is going to be big, whether we like it or not. Of course, it can be used for positive things, but it can also be used for negative things. And I think that will be, the kind of fight there that could be between those two. We don't want AI everywhere, and what will happen to people's jobs when they're not needed anymore and artificial intelligence takes over. And the surveillance technology, it's quite frightening when you hear what's actually going on already in here, but in places like China, you know, where everything is surveyed and looked at, and it is quite worrying what's going on there. But you know, we have to try and think of the positive side. I mean, on one hand, in medicine, in medical procedures and so on, AI can detect cancers and problems very, very quickly, which a human couldn't do. And they're probably, the tests they've done are more accurate. So they're very positive things that could come out of that. And we can hope for the best there. I dabble a little into numerology. My partner does numerology quite a lot, and I find it very interesting. So just out of interest, this year, the year 2020, was actually a number 4 in numerology in the 9-year cycle. And number 4 is all about, again, change, massive change, exceptional change, and about, you know, changing our structures, our values, everything changed this year. And so that very much ties in with the astrology that was going on as well, you know, this breakdown of the established order and so on. Well, we're coming to the end of that year 4 now, and we then will be coming into the year 5, which is a very kind of different energy. We've got the 4 was a Uranian energy. Uranus is the awakener, breaking down structures. So now we move into a 5, and that's very much about Mercury. It's linked to the planet Mercury, and in astrology and in mythology, Mercury is the messenger of the gods. So he's bringing the messages from heaven to earth to the underworld, backwards and forwards. So I think we could look at this year that's coming as a year of conscious creativity, very much about freedom of expression, which also echoes back to the Aquarian age. So I think that will be the big theme for next year. And we want that freedom to express ourselves and to be creative. And that also links into astrology of the whole, I mean, it all links together when you look at it, you know, that it is about being creative. And I think that's something really, really important. I'm sure you've all found that this year, that, you know, being creative has probably kept us sane. One of the things that's kept us sane, going out in nature, being creative. And it's really important to keep that going and to understand as much as you can and learn as much as you can. And find out, I think, again, with Jupiter, it's about truth. You know, we want to know the truth. And I think we'll all be on a quest to find that out in whatever way we want to do it. But whatever's coming, I think it's going to be quite a roller coaster next year, and we've got to look at it on the positive of how we can work with that, continue with our work, and spread the message. You know, that that's really important. I just thought I might stop now and just see if anybody's got any questions at all.
Okay, has anyone got any questions for Christine?
Christine, it's Julia here.
Hello.
I'll put my video on actually so you can see me. I was having my supper earlier, so I didn't want you to see me eating.
Oh, okay.
I'm interested in Chiron. What do you think about Chiron?
Sorry, my video's disappeared now. Yes, I mean, I do look at Chiron a lot. I don't talk about it to people who don't know a lot about astrology because it's a little bit complicated, but we do look at Chiron. Chiron is a planetoid. I mean, it's only really been in astrology, being used in astrology since the 70s-ish, around that time. And it's a planetoid, it's not a planet, it's a kind of between thing. The mythology of Chiron is the wounded healer, and it's all about rejection and fear and how you can actually overcome that. So Chiron is important, certainly I always look at it in when I'm doing a chart. And did you mean this year or where it is now? Or
Yeah, I mean, it seems as though it's become, well, in my chart anyway, it seems as though it's been quite important. So I was just interested in knowing a little bit more about it. I did buy a book about Chiron, but it was so complicated that it blew my mind entirely.
Yeah, that was probably, was that Melanie Reinhardt's book?
Yes, that's the one,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it's very good, and she's very good, but it is quite complicated. It's very mythological and very in depth. But I mean, quite simply, wherever Chiron is in your chart, simply is probably not the right word. It shows where you might have a weak spot, your Achilles heel, whatever sign it's in, whatever house it's in, and what your challenges are and what you have to overcome, you know, to get to be who you're meant to be, really. And very often I think through people's wounds and fears, and when they've overcome them, they actually become stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, through having gone through that. And Chiron at the moment is in the sign of Aries, so it's not been in there very long. I think it changed at the end of last year, and it's quite a powerful sign there. And I think because of before, when it was in Pisces, you know, people were not quite sure, spirituality was becoming more of a buzzword, but now I think, and healing and alternative healing and all of those things, I think we felt that in Aries people would have more of a voice, that they would actually you know, really want to find out about natural health. And I mean, I certainly think over the last few years, so many new types of healing and working have you know, come up all over the place. So that I think is important there, that it's a lot stronger in Aries. And Chiron's an interesting one from a cycle point of view, because it has about a 50-year cycle, between 50 and 52 years to go right round the chart. And I feel the Chiron return, as we call that when it comes back, often coincides for women with menopause, and I've worked with quite a few people there of what's going on around that time, because you know, unfortunately in our society it's a bit, oh, you know, that's the end, you know, it's a bit better now. But I've actually found that the women I've worked with of 50 plus, that's been the time of their life when they've really started to do what they want to do, and you know, start their life and be on the path that they're meant to be on. So it's a very interesting cycle, one that's probably worthy of a talk itself.
I'll have to have another go at that book and see if I can.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you know, maybe some websites are quite good with explanations, just to know where that is and so on. But it is certainly, when I'm teaching astrology, that is kind of more middle to end of the course rather than the beginning, because it is quite complicated to understand, but certainly very worthwhile and necessary. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Suzanne?
Can I ask a question about the difference between the North and the South Node? As I understand it, the South Node is the first half of your life, and then the North Node is your kind of, like you were just saying, you come into an age.
Yeah, I mean, again, people who haven't done anything with astrology and don't know what that is would probably think, what? You know, what's that? It's not a planet, it's a point on the chart. And I remember once I was out with some friends for dinner with another astrologer friend of mine, and he turned to one of the ladies there and said, "Can you tell me where your North Node is?" And she said, "Oh, I've never been asked that before." And it was just so funny. She didn't have a clue. And but again, these are points in the chart that are called the karmic points. The South Node is often not necessarily the first half of your life, but it's connected with past lives very often. So from that point, you can look what's been in your past and what you've got to overcome to reach to the North Node in your chart. But I think, you know, that, as I said, some people have never even seen a birth chart, so they might not even know. But these are points that, you know, are very much tied in with karmic work and things that you have to overcome so that you can, you know, become who you're meant to be, which to me is the most important part of astrology, of understanding that, you know. And interesting, because last week when Cherry was talking about past lives and things, you know, that's all very much related, isn't it? That you could pick out what there should be a correlation there of what's kind of gone on. I mean, I use them, but not in great depth. I have several colleagues who are karmic astrologers, and they work with that all the time, you know.
Oh wow, it's interesting.
And it is quite yes, quite revealing, I'm sure. But
my daughter's just got into astrology. She's 15, and her best friend, of course, they're asking me all sorts of questions. And I did astrology a long time ago, but you know, in a tiny way compared to, you know, what you're doing. So I'm just trying to remember some of the knowledge that I had. So
I mean,
might
it
well
is,
be ask you more questions.
yeah, that's fine. It is a very in-depth study, you know, but I think, you know, you can learn quite a lot. I mean, the school that I teach with in London that Karen mentioned, the Mayo School of Astrology, is one of many that teach a basic certificate course to start with, and you can do that in a year if you wanted to. You know,
I learnt the Huber method.
Huber, is that the one you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Did you
was a very
finish it? The
short
diploma?
course compared to the full thing. So
Yeah. They work slightly differently too. But it's all very interesting because they use the psychosynthesis of the Assagioli, you know, the method. That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, astrology's got so many, as I said, so many different uses, so many different ways of working. It's just fascinating, and I just always think, you know, how can anybody live without it, kind of thing. You know, another thing that's really important is in your family, you know, where you, if you've got your partner, your children, you know, you can understand them so much better if you have the chart. You know, and certainly in relationships, I work with people in relationships, you know, the question, you know, will we get on, who's the right person for me, all that stuff. You know, when you have a relationship, you really can start to look at, not necessarily to say, oh, that's not going to work or that's no good, but just to see what things will have to be worked on more, you know, and where the difficulties might be. And we all know that relationships are about being tolerant and understanding the other person. So astrology is the perfect tool to help in that way, really.
I always say with astrology and some other therapies that you know, your path is your path. You can go through life kicking and screaming, or you can go and get help to tread your path so that it's more easier with a few more tools. So it's quite good to look at all angles of
definitely.
journey. So it's a great tool to have for sure. Thank you.
It's interesting, actually, Christine. I wonder, because in our family we have loads of Leos, like a whole cluster of Leos. Do you find sometimes in families that that sort of happens? Is that fluke? I don't know.
No, it's not. It's absolutely, there are, and I think, I don't know, I haven't done a really wide study, but I think in most families there will be a few signs that just repeat and repeat and repeat through the generations. And you can clearly see that in all the families I've worked with and looked at, you know, and you hear that people sometimes say, oh, you're just like your grandfather, or, you know, and then you look at the chart and think, well, yeah, look at all that, you know, they've picked up the same sign. I mean, I know for myself, I mean, I'm Libra, and my mum had Libra rising, my daughter's a Libra, and we've all got Libra Scorpio runs all the way through our families. It's really interesting on my mother's side, not so much on my father's, but you just think, you know, that's, and sometimes not even just the same sign, you know, it's the same degree of the zodiac, you know, you've got a repeat of a moon or Mars or Venus, and it's just going right through a line. It's fascinating. What's happening there, and you know, just to see how that, you know, works with the dynamics of the family, really.
Yeah, I mean, they're all very different, but there's a whole batch of them, and they're from one end of Leo to the other, and then we've got one on the cusp of Leo and Virgo, and then there's me in Virgo. It's like we stretch across the summer into September. Really, really strange how it goes. Faye, you got a question? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Do you unmute. Do you ever find that there's like synchronicities? So if you're a Libra, do you find that you're, you know, maybe friends with more Taurus people, or that you're sometimes drawn to certain energies, like a 14-5 or whatever it is, and however it plays out? Do you ever find that? Or?
Yes, definitely. I mean, when you look with the elements, and I mentioned it a bit with the team building, but this can just work with who we are. The elements, the fire and the air elements, are said to be the more extrovert, and then the water and the earth are more introvert, and they will naturally be drawn, you know, to each other. And so very often people will say, and I think you mentioned Libra and Taurus, did you?
As friends, yeah. I always find
Yes.
that I'm a Libran as well, but I always seem to get on very well with Taurus people.
Yeah, and those two signs are both ruled by the planet Venus, so there'd be a kind of a synchronicity there. But yes, and you know, the elements do, you know, play a part, and we sometimes say that fire and water don't mix so well, and then people say, oh yes, but you know, I've been married for 40 years and we're fire and water and it's fine. And but we just know that fire is very different to water, and I think as long as those two signs understand each other, you know, it can work. And there certainly is that, you know, but we might be attracted more to a different element. That doesn't necessarily mean we can live together with that person, but you know, often people say that they are attracted to, you know, certain signs. Definitely, you know, I think that's I think we've probably all found that's happened in our life, and even with our own family. I mean, you know, with our children, if we have them, and or it's just sometimes easier with one sign than it is with another, and the astrology can help you there. You know, that's not to say you might like anybody better, but it's just knowing the astrology does help, you know, with anybody, I think, you know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sherry, do you want to unmute yourself? Shall I? Can you unmute? Shall I unmute you? You've done it. Okay.
Have I done it? Oh, okay.
Look.
I'd like to ask, please, your view on Pluto, because I studied astrology at depths back in the 70s, before Pluto was heard of, when Mars negative ruled Scorpio, and then suddenly this block of ice that is 300 miles across is the planet for Scorpio. And as a Scorpio, I was greatly offended to think that and it gets so much publicity when really it's probably somebody's moon that's just been hit by an asteroid. It's so tiny and knocked off course. So how does it get so much importance?
Yeah, how does it? I mean, I think Pluto was assigned to, I don't know exactly when, I mean, it was discovered in not discovered because it'd always been there, but it was kind of brought to our attention in 1930, I believe, around that time. And the connection is with Pluto, the god of the underworld, and so that's why it was connected with Scorpio. But I still always would look at Mars as well as Pluto. And I think, yes, people say, oh, it's, and traditional astrologers don't use any of the outer planets. They don't use Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. They don't exist. But I think we can't really deny, and okay, we haven't had masses of time, you know, in the scheme of things, to find out what Pluto does. But the research that has been done, and you can look back, even though it wasn't, you know, in our consciousness as such, it was always there, and you can look back and see wherever Pluto's involved, upheavals, what's going on. I mean, in, you know, 1930s, I think it was 1936, I'm not sure, but it would have been before the war, and Pluto, plutonium, the atom bomb, and all of those things were then connected with it. And I think, although physically it's quite small, I think it works in like homeopathy, that less is, you know, more. And I think you couldn't deny the presence of Pluto in your own chart, and what's going on at the moment. You know, that's but I mean, you don't have to use it. But I as I said, we've got several astrologers in our community who don't use the outer planets at all. They feel there's enough. I mean, the ancients only used up to Saturn because that's the last one that they could see. But we've evolved since then. You know, Uranus has come in, Neptune's come in, and those planets are there. And so, do you use it? Do you look at it or not?
Well, I must admit, I don't study astrology anymore. I did spend several years, and I was very lucky that I actually worked with somebody who was the son of one of the greats in India. So he used to teach me the way they did it in India. But when I belonged to the British Federation, everything was done on blackboards with chalk, you know. But it was amazing, truly amazing. And they would put up a birth chart at the end of a lecture, and they'd say there'd be 200 people in a room, and they'd say, you've got half an hour. And in half an hour, 80% of people would come up with an identical life story, week in, week out. And when you see that happen, you realize how accurate astrology is. It's brilliant.
Yes, I mean, in India, it's used, you know, it's again a bit like the Chinese. They don't do anything without using astrology. I mean, the Vedic astrology is quite different to our astrology. And, you know, if you have your chart done in India or by a Vedic astrologer, it would probably come out, you know, you're a different sign because we're 24 degrees difference. That's another, you know, people say, well, how can that one work and that one doesn't, you know, it's just a different way of doing it. That's really, you know, but yeah, I don't think we can deny Pluto at the moment. As I said before, it's a 248-year cycle to go right round, and it's kind of coming back. And interestingly, it's very powerful in the chart of the USA. In the next years, they will have what's known as the Pluto Return, and I think, you know, that is, who knows, it could be the end of a cycle, you know, and it is associated with the mythology of the underworld and, you know, the strength from Scorpio, and it's.
But Mars has been given back to Scorpio, hasn't it?
Well, it's a co-ruler. We call them co-rulers, you know. But I always think, you know, Mars should always be looked at as part of Scorpio, as Jupiter for Pisces, you know, because they're the old rulers. And then Saturn is obviously for Aquarius as well. Although Uranus is in modern astrology has taken over there, but it's still, you know, needs to be looked at, I think, as part of it, really.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else got any questions for Christine? No? Okay. Do you want to carry on, Christine?
Yes, I was going to just say a little bit. I've got on my little list here about the elements, but I've kind of mentioned those just now anyway. And the flower essences I mentioned earlier, which I work with quite a bit. And there again, I think, you know, using, if you work with them or you've used them, to use the one that's associated with your moon sign. And often, you know, in the consultation, I will then prescribe usually about 6 different essences, and look at what's going on in the chart, you know, what's moving. I mean, you have the birth chart as is, but you've also got what's, you know, happening now, where all those planets moved to since that person was born, you know, where are they going, what are they doing? So, you know, you look at all of those things. And I think for all of us, the kind of a really important part is the moon. You know, we all are connected to the moon. We see the moon. We probably don't spend that much time looking up to see where Mars is or where Jupiter is or Venus, unless they're very bright in the sky, which is lovely. But we all know about the moon and the phases of the moon. And if you look at the kind of health connection, I don't know how many people here look at that with the work that they do, but I've been working with a nutritionist recently, and she's very keen on looking at moon cycles, particularly eclipses. And like, we've just had some very powerful eclipses that I think have knocked a few people for 6. They've been really powerful, and obviously the moon is even stronger then. And we looked at, you know, at the full moon particularly, you know, and it's got kind of a mythology of its own, hasn't it? You know, the word lunatic comes from there. We don't really use that word anymore, but, you know, that things happen at the full moon, people start howling, and the wolves howl. And you know, there have been reports that there's more violence around, there's more tension, people can't sleep. I think most people I know, you know, are tuned in some way to the moon and feel that there's something going on there, and it's part of this kind of ebb and flow. But health-wise, at the full moon, apparently our blood is actually thicker. If it's measured, it would be shown to be like that, and the body is actually more toxic around that time. So, you know, your blood sugar can dip, the energy, and sleep is difficult for a lot of people around that time. So I think it's important there to take a lot more care of yourself around that time, and, you know, tune into your body, what's actually happening, what's going on. And I was reading the other day that there are actually some articles, I mean, a lot of articles say, oh, it's all rubbish, science has proven it's all a load of nonsense, the moon has no effect whatsoever. But I think most of us here would probably disagree with that. And there have actually been some studies in the medical journals that it's, blood is, because it's thicker, it's actually better for healing. I was reading about heart operations in America, that they actually made a study that people did tend to get better around that time and have less time in hospital, and they seem to work better. So that sounded interesting. And kidney stone pain, if anyone suffers from kidney stone, it can increase around the full moon. I mean, I don't know about this, I don't know anyone who's had it, but there have been studies, and also kind of urological emergencies happen more around that time. And I suppose because, we're all that water, and the moon is the pull, and the full moon is the Earth's in the middle, the sun's one side and the moon is the other, so there is this gravitational pull there. And so that to me makes sense that there would be things happening in the body that we can relate to, since we're made up of so much water and the blood. And the new moon tends to be more a calming time. I mean, astrologically as well, and probably in nature and everything, the new moon is more about beginnings and starting new things, planting things. So it is, in that sense, a calmer time. Although some people report not being able to sleep new moon or full moon. And the new moon you don't know, because you can't see anything. It's dark, unless you've looked in the moon calendar. And you might say, oh, I can't sleep. Oh, funnily enough, it's new moon. I just found out. That's why. Whereas the full moon you can see, so And at the new moon, the blood is thinner, and it's actually a good time to detox quite readily. And apparently there have been studies that blood pressure can change. It can drop around both the moons, new and full moons. So, I think there's a huge amount of study that can be done there to look into that as to what's going on. And obviously on a more personal level, you'd like to know, what moon is affecting me. Like we just had the new moon on last week, it wasn't on the 14th, Monday, in Sagittarius. So people who are Sagittarians or have their moon in Sagittarius, it would affect them probably even more. And then you can go even further and look at, what does Sagittarius rule astrologically, medically? Sagittarius rules the hips and the thighs. So is there a correlation there? And through Jupiter, which rules Sagittarius, the liver could be involved. So, it can go on and on and on. There's an awful lot of information that you could get out of that. And so it's good to know, when is it your new moon in a year, for whatever sign you are, when's your new moon coming up, or when there's a full moon on an important part of your chart that can bring up something personally for you, emotionally. I mean, I think people mostly know that emotions are quite high around the moons, tension, and there have been reports in prisons and from police officers that there is an increase in violence around the full moon. So I think that's something that it's worth being aware of. So it's good for looking at knowing that where your moon is, what's going on, and from that kind of medical point of view. I mean, medical astrology in itself is that each sign rules a different part of the body, and amazing what you can kind of find out. Did you want to ask something on that, Karen?
No, it's all right. Sorry.
You were looking quizzically.
No, I'm just taking all the information. There's so much. I never realized just how much astrology affected so much. Such depth of, obviously I realized it affects your health, but such a depth of when to have an operation or something like that.
I mean, the report I was reading from these heart surgeons, it was in America somewhere, and they said they had recognized things, but you can't plan your operation around. We often joke with astrologers, well, I can't have an operation then because of this, and but you wouldn't get the choice. You'd just be grateful to get a date for whatever's going to be done to you, and unless you did have the luxury of choosing, then I think it might be an idea not to have it around that time. lots of different things. And so I think from that point of view, the moon and health, and you know, we've probably all heard of Mercury and how it goes into the retrograde motion 3-4 times a year, and that's another good time not to do this and not to do that. And but sometimes we have no choice and we just have to get on with it and hope for the best.
I
Really.
blame everything on that.
Sorry?
I blame everything on Mercury.
On Mercury retrograde, yeah, I know. I mean, it's, yeah, you know, lots of astrologers is always all Mercury, but it really, what's actually happening, of course, it's Mercury or any planet is not moving backwards, because they don't move backwards. It appears to be moving backwards. And I think, you know, the clue is in the word, the retrograde, it's revise, rework, look at things, review. You know, that's the message of when Mercury's moving backwards, particularly in business, in commerce, in travel, because Mercury rules those things. So, you know, but it's nice actually, I think now over the last 10-20 years, newspapers and magazines run quite a few articles about these things. So, you know, 10-20 years ago, if you mentioned Mercury retrograde, nobody knew what you're talking about, but now everybody knows, you know, oh yes, Mercury retrograde. So it's kind of, you know, normal to say things like that. Okay, so Karen, shall I reveal your chart?
Oh, yes, please.
I'm going to put it. I haven't got my head around doing PowerPoint things yet, so it's just going to be like this.
Oh, okay.
So Karen kindly gave me her details, and I thought, well, we'll just pop it up. As you can see, hieroglyphics. Unless you do astrology, you wouldn't have a clue what that was all about. There's quite a lot of information on there. But I think the main thing I wanted to kind of say was Karen's a Virgo, so you know most people know the kind of keywords about Virgos, you know, practical and tidy, analytical mind. The planet Mercury rules Virgo, so you know, and I think you agreed that you felt that was very much a part of who you were. You know, it's very much detail, being able to analyze things, look at things and sort them out. I think the tidiness is quite an interesting one, because people often say, oh, Virgos are so tidy. And then some Virgos say, well, no, not always. But I found it's sometimes just in one area of life that, you know,
Mine's in
everything's tidy.
everything has to be tidy in my life.
You do?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, and that's, yeah, you've got, I have to say, it's not just the sun in your chart that's in Virgo. You've got Venus there, Pluto there, and Uranus there, so you've got a lot of Virgo in your chart.
I did say I thought I was typical Virgo, so that's like I am.
Yeah. And then over in that corner here, this is what we call the rising sign, and this is the ascendant, which you may have heard of,
Okay.
which is in Sagittarius for you. Now, we didn't have an exact birth time. You said about 3:15, didn't you?
Yeah, my mum said nearer 3 a.m. than 4. That's as close as we could get.
Yeah. So, but I checked actually going right round to like 10 to 4, the ascendant would still have been in Sagittarius, whatever time you were born. So
okay.
Within that window. So, so Sagittarius rising, I mean, Sagittarius is completely different to Virgo.
Oh.
It's a fire sign.
Oh.
Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So there's something, you know, you can kind of look at that because the way it's aspected into the sun, it's a bit of a battle going on there. Sagittarius wants to be not analytical, not tidy, you know, so, you know, and it's very much, I think, about being, you know, finding out who you are, and yes, the Virgo stuff, but how much of that is you, and how much of that is what you've been taught to do, you know, learned behaviors. And that doesn't mean you suddenly don't do those things, but Sagittarius is very much about freedom and being free, being your own person, following your path.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've always been on the healing path, or is that came later, or
well, I think I've always been interested in it, and I sort of got on that path because allopathic medicine didn't really help me with certain things, so I got on that path for that reason. I mean, I've always been interested in what makes people tick. What, you know, I've always been curious about people.
Yeah.
So it sort of got me into a holistic. Excuse my husband for sneezing. I know that's really loud. So that's what really got me into that area, sort of trying to solve my own health issue, and interested about other people. I've always wanted to understand people.
Yeah.
It's real.
And I mean, Sagittarius is also very much this quest for learning and always wanting to know more and understand more, and you know, it's kind of never ending, you know.
Yeah, it does feel like that, but it's good though as well. I don't feel that's a feeling.
No, that's lovely.
It's like a lifelong quest to
Yes,
understand people, and in that be able to be you know, less judgmental. Just by understanding them, you can just say, okay, well, that's, you know, when you understand, you have more compassion and for people. So I think that's where my interest came from, I think.
Yes, and then the other thing we're looking at, you know, because obviously each planet gives a different flavor, a different layer to the person, and then we've got the moon in your chart, which is in the sign of Cancer.
Oh.
And that's a water sign. That's a very emotional placement. It's very sensitive. So, you know, kind of Virgo, Cancer moon, it suggests that there's a lot of deep kind of sensitivity, and you know,
definitely. I'm definitely absolute empath and very sensitive to things.
Yeah, and it's also very kind.
I cry at X Factor. I mean, you know, seriously. I mean, what's that about? And my daughter tells me off. You get upset for? It's like, they want to go out. It's terrible.
Moon in Cancer. You probably also find that you're very in tune with the moon, the phases of the moon, I would imagine. You know,
I think I am. I don't do it all the time, but I do notice sometimes, oh, it's full moon, oh, it's new moon, and there's changes in emotions. And
yes, and you might find you do get a bit moody or emotional, or you know, so that's quite strong. Just one other thing I wanted to say, the lines in the middle of the chart, what we call the aspects, how each planet relates to the other planet, and what I saw straight away on your chart was this big triangle, which is called in astrology the Grand Trine, and it's between Neptune, the moon, and Chiron, which we actually mentioned earlier. So without knowing anything about you, I would kind of think there's a lot of healing gifts in this chart, you know, a lot of this kind of helping people, intuition and all of that, you know, which obviously I don't, you know, how you've come to that. You said through illness yourself.
Well, I had an interest in people, so I started with NLP because I was very interested in how people worked, how people came to where they are. I've always had a fascination for why people think a certain way, and trying to understand them. But then the health side was like I had acupuncture because allopathic medicine didn't really work for me, and then I got into the healing side of stuff for that reason, and realized very quickly that emotional healing is very connected to, you know, physical healing anyway. So
so that really suggests that kind of main part of your chart there, that triangle. But because that the triangles are sometimes energy that's not always accessible, it can take a while sometimes to get there, you know. But you know, I think from what I can see, you're kind of well on your path there, and it's very much what you need to be doing, you know. Just sometimes it might be because of caring and doing for everybody else, you sometimes might need to put yourself first, you know.
Sometimes. that's the drawback with being an empath, isn't it? I'm sure many people in this Zoom room have the same.
I mean, that I think you know, that is very much a signature for, you know, a carer or a healer of some sort, working in that kind of work. So
it's
I mean, really,
it's that thing where someone says, oh, I really need your help, and you're like, yeah, I'm here, you know, and you don't think, actually I'm really tired and I did this, I haven't eaten, oh no, I'm here, I'm helping you.
Yeah, that's probably something that you might need to work with a bit more to yeah, put your, always put other people first. But it's really to show that, there's so many different layers, and we look at them, what planets are traveling around, what's happened, where's Saturn, where's Jupiter, so there's lots of other things that, come up through life, and it's your map, really, it's your guide.
That's fascinating, because you've picked
Yeah,
up so many things that I think are very true of who I am. It's just fascinating that I don't know, do you think with astrology then it's like that was always my path, I was always going to end up where I am? Is that how it works?
No, not necessarily, because I mean, there are indications, and because and I often think, you can't just say, oh, you're this, you're that, oh, that's happened, because the planet Neptune, which is involved in this triangle here, is, it can also be an escapism. It's very imaginative. It could be very creative. It could be an artist. It could be a musician. So there's lots of. I think that then the beauty of astrology is looking at what's more powerful, what's, and what's kind of gone on in life. So, but it's kind of great to see, and I think because Suzanne mentioned the nodes, the north and the south node. They're quite emphasized as well, that following your path, I think, is you're kind of drawn towards that, and I think we all experience that in life, that something comes up, or something has to end and we don't want it to end, and yet the universe is kind of indicating it has to, and we resist and we resist, and sometimes something then just happens, and we have to think of what we've got to learn out of that, and how can we move on and better ourselves, and I think, and it can take a while sometimes. It can, it doesn't always happen straight away. It can be an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But,
thank you so much. I mean,
it was just also to show that there's a lot more to it than I think most of you know. Those who studied astrology and looked at it, but I mean, we all know that people talk about newspaper astrology and magazines and sun signs and all that. And, I mean, I don't knock them. I think that's fine if that's what they're entertainment, and
they are entertainment.
They're usually very positive. I mean, you don't usually get negative ones saying you're going to have an accident or something awful is going to happen. So for some people, that's a nice little affirmation for the day, really.
Yeah. You take it as it is, don't you?
Yeah, it's fun, and it can be used like that. And as I said before, these days I think there's a lot more information given about astrology, so people actually, if someone's writing about Mercury retrograde or this, think, oh, I want to know more about that, I'll look it up. So I think it's nearly, I don't want to go over time or anything.
No, that's brilliant. Should we open up to questions? Anyone got any questions at all? Yep, Sue, go ahead. Unmute yourself. Oh, do you want me to unmute you? Unmute.
Okay, I'm off. I just wanted to say that it's been probably about 12 years ago when I first met Christine, and from there on, really, she worked with me, first of all, the astrology, then she did life coaching with me, the bark remedies. They were actually really, really good, because they kind of, sort of like calmed me down in sort of, not just like the rescue remedies, but I seem to remember there being walnut and all sorts of other things in there that kind of helped my emotions at the time, and you helped me get through a very difficult relationship that I was in. So I just really wanted to say that it was great working with you. So, and then we've become great friends since then. So
yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sue.
That's nice. Thanks.
Yes, flower remedies are really very powerful, and I think people are going to be needing, or have this year needed them more and more, and I think they will continue to handle all the different types of healing that there's there, really.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue. Anyone else with questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for for talking to us about astrology. I personally find it fascinating. I think everyone here does. We all know there's so much in it, and it's been great to have you on talking it through. I've learned, I'm sure everyone else has, but I don't know. I mean, my level of astrology is probably not as deep as some, but I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Because so many people are becoming more and more interested and wanting to, I'm actually planning to put a course together next year in January, an online course. So I'll offer it out to people, and I'll mention it again maybe at a different talk, but that's my intention.
Okay. Have you got a website, Christine?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Could you pop your website details up on the WhatsApp group?
I think it was on. Yes, I will. I think it's been on there because Karen put it on.
I know to pop it on after the meeting because
I will. Yes,
other people chat and then it just disappears.
Yeah,
so pop it on.
And,
just had
certainly, the idea of the course, I think, is quite a few
then people can get in touch with
it'll be online, so it all works really well.
Yeah.
And, yes, that came to me on the Sagittarius new moon on the eclipse, and that's what I need to do. Sagittarius education, broaden the horizons. So I think that will be taking place now. Yeah. So
fabulous.
You might want to come on. Right. It's been lovely talking to you. It's been a lovely
thank you very much. That was really good, and it was good for me to have a refresher as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for doing my chart. I really, really appreciate that. You don't know how much. I've always wanted my chart done.
Just a little glimpse.
Well, it's more than I've ever had. So.
Yes, all right. Great.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate you coming and your time that you spent, and hopefully you've all learnt a lot and been fascinated a bit more about astrology. I definitely have. So thank you all. I think we've got when's the next talk, Suzanne?
Well, I don't think the next talk is with Kay Crotty. She's coming along to do numerology for us in the new year. We haven't set a firm date, so keep your eye on the WhatsApp group. And that will be popping up early in the new year, so we'll have Christmas off so that everybody can have some downtime and probably eat too much. Try not to, but we all probably will. And we'll be back in the new year, and so it's Kay next. And I think Karen keeps poking me, says that you've started the group when I actually haven't done a talk yet, so I might.
It's Suzanne's turn.
You'll all disappear.
Just everyone put something in WhatsApp and say, when are you doing yours, Suzanne? Just poke
keep poking me. I might put someone else in before something else interesting might come up. But we have got more speakers. We've got people now because the group's been running all the way through lockdown, coming along, and lots of interesting talks, and then we can have some of the people back that we had earlier in the year. So it's running every 2 weeks now. Monday is our normal night for these meetings. We moved it to Thursday simply because it would have been really lovely for you to do it on Monday, but I think a lot of people had other arrangements.
No, that's fine. We've got the solstice and everybody will be rushing out.
Lots of people are doing different meditations and all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? The solstice is coming up now, and then the shortest day, and then it all starts to slowly brighten up.
Nicer, doesn't it? So that's lovely. So thank you everybody, and we'll see you. Merry Christmas.
Wishes to everybody, and
take
the
care.
best of the year. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Christine. Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
You. Okay.